morning and welcome to Rising. We have a perfectly adequate show for you today. Channeling Ryan Grimm a little bit, who used to say that. Briahna, I think we dressed so closely today that it looks visually uninteresting on screen.
We're on our Bobbsy twins path right now. I don't know what's going on. We're too much in sync.
All right, well, we're going to try to get through it anyway, delivering you the news as best we can. Take it away.
All right, well, on Wednesday, President Biden was asked directly about his alleged pay-for-play influence peddling scheme for the first time since former Associate Devin Archer's congressional testimony. Let's watch.
There's this testimony now where one of your son's former business associates is claiming that you were on speakerphone a lot with them talking business. Is that what?
Never talk business in anybody. And I knew you'd have a lousy question.
Well, why is that a lousy question?
Because it's not true.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Doocy getting back in the game. I believe he's been on paternity leave. Nice to see him back. Yesterday, House Republicans published a memo alleging bank statements show that Hunter Biden received over $20 million in payments from Russian and Kazakhstani oligarchs, as well as Ukrainian Burisma Holdings. Screenshots of redacted bank records purport to show Hunter Biden received these payments while his dad, Joe Biden, was vice president. It should be noted that the memo does not show direct payments were made to Joe Biden, but he did attend dinners with Burisma representatives.
According to a new report from the Washington Examiner, a handful of aides worked with both Hunter Biden's business and Joe Biden's political operation at various times, suggesting that there might have been an even less significant effort to keep those two things separate. President Biden has maintained he had no involvement in his son's business deals, but former employee says otherwise, claiming she set up a White House tour for Hunter's associates. Now, I'm sure Doocy is kicking himself because part of the reason that Biden might have been able to truthfully answer that question the way he did is because he asked Biden whether he spoke about business on the phone. And what Devin Archer's testimony was just that he was on the phone when business was being discussed. So that he gave Biden a little bit of room to wiggle out of that. But many people believe that him being willing to show up to those kind of business phone calls was serving the purpose in and of itself of this kind of influence peddling
Right, because
scheme.
what is the business? The business is Joe Biden having proximity to Hunter Biden and all of these Burisma and these oligarchs, these people. So, the mere fact that he's participating in these calls, he's meeting these people without having, set up, like, obviously, I mean, if he accidentally walks into the same room as a business person, doesn't necessarily make it some kind of entanglement, but you would need to set up these ironclad kind of protections, say, nope, no business. I have nothing to do with it. My son's on his own. I love him, but he's on his own. I can give you nothing. You could make those disclosures, and that would go a long way. But it doesn't seem like any of that kind of thing took place. And again, this is at the time where he's vice president, and he is making policy. He brags on tape about making policy having to do with Ukraine, having to do with Burisma.
Yeah. Also, twice, you can believe that in the course of one's life, you might bump into your child while they're doing business. But Devin Archer testified that he personally knew, he was personally present for it happening at least 20 times, and he was not in the room every time Hunter Biden obviously made a business transaction.
One time Hunter Biden let's say there was one time Hunter Biden calls him with the business associates in the room and does this little demonstration of influence peddling, and Joe Biden's polite about it, and then the next day texts Hunter and says, never effing do that to me again. That's what you should do.
Yes.
But it went on and on and on.
Yes.
Over and over again.
What do you make about these new allegations about records that show, these bank statements that show that Hunter Biden received $20 million
That's a lot of money.
Payments from these questionable figures, oligarchs and the like?
This is not chump change. This is a lot of money. Clearly, those people thought they were getting something out of this relationship. Yeah. They thought it was worth $20 million. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, from a political perspective, do you think this is serving, I think the intended purpose from the perspective of the Republicans is Trump is being indicted many times over. There are going to be some persuadable voters who might be uncomfortable with the idea that their candidate, one of the candidates, is under investigation in criminal matters. Does this even the playing field sufficiently, even though there has yet to emerge a smoking gun that connects us all to the president himself?
Yeah, I mean, I want to be fair to Joe Biden. I don't think there's not evidence demonstrating a kind of equivalent behavior to some of the things Trump is accused of, although I have my own I have a lot of reservations about many of the indictments against Donald Trump, both strategically, tactically, even on the law itself, the effect they'll have on political expression. But I know why Republicans are pursuing this, and the mainstream media should be totally embarrassed for the way they've treated these accusations up until now as just totally a nothing burger, nothing to even look into. I think a lot of Americans feel gaslit with respect to Hunter Biden from the very beginning. They were told what the information we're getting about him, which comes from this laptop, was planted by Russians to confuse and deceive you. And Joe Biden ran on that. He ran on it. He ran with that. He used that as an explanation to excuse all of this, to make people not pay attention to it. Look away. Don't look at it. If you're looking at it, you're falling for what the Russians want you to believe. And we've come so far since then. And I think it should be humiliating for people who said don't look, who believed exactly what the intelligence officials and even worse, the mainstream media wanted you to believe about it.
Well, other GOPers are getting in on this issue. On News Nation Wednesday, GOP presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy sought to tie the U.S.'s involvement in the Ukraine war and Donald Trump's impeachment with the alleged Hunter Biden bribery scheme. Let's listen.
Hunter Biden has been a geopolitical disaster already. But those behaviors have resulted in the impeachment of a former U.S. president. But now it is the same country to whom, and by the way, here's what we do know. $5 million to one side or not. Hunter Biden had no expertise to sit on the board of an energy company.
No doubt about it.
What the heck is he doing?
No doubt about it.
Sitting on the board of Burisma.
He was selling his
name. So that alone warrants an investigation.
Using
There's no
his name.
doubt about it.
Look, I have no problem with the investigation. Selling his name, using the Biden name, totally unqualified. Agree with you on all of that.
To a country that's getting $200 billion
but again,
of our money.
But then you mentioned the impeachment as if it's somehow related to Hunter Biden. I mean, Donald Trump was asking the Ukrainians to open an investigation that they didn't have into his political opponent. I mean, that is, regardless of whether it's impeachable, it's not a good thing to do, no?
At a time when Hunter Biden is sitting on the board of a company whose owner is part of Ukraine's National Security Council. So my question is, why is it, here's my question. If we're sending $300 billion of taxpayer money to another country, and there are credible allegations that there are financial relationships between a state-affiliated company and the son of the U.S. president, whether it's $5 million or a board seat, at least the board seat is well known. We should be getting to the bottom of that.
I mean, that is an interesting question. I think that there's definitely, as we discussed at length already, something to this being so suspicious on its face that it merits an investigation. But do you think there's something separate and apart from the question of whether or not it should be investigated, the question of whether or not a president in the course of a race should try to, provoke, weaponize the Justice Department, as that term has become so common, weaponize the Justice Department because it might provide them a political advantage? In that context, is there something fundamentally problematic about that merits impeachment or at least some kind of public censorship?
Sure. I think if we go back to the first impeachment, there were two of them. If we go back to the first one, some people framed what Trump had done as wrong because he was trying to exert influence on this on the Ukrainians. I was like, I don't think that was what was wrong. I mean, all of diplomacy is trying to exert influence. America is trying to engage in diplomacy to have countries adopt policies that we think are more favorable to America.
Or pick presidents, prime ministers, as we'll talk about later today.
We use the language of more favorable to democracy and democratic interests. What we mean is more favorable to us.
Right.
But that's all countries do that. That is what diplomacy is. What was wrong about what Trump did is that the influence he was trying to arrive at was not necessarily in America's interest. It was just in his narrow electoral interests. Right. And it seemed now I think one can have can question that impeachment, whether that conduct being inappropriate, whether it rose to the level of he should be impeached.
Sure.
Certainly in comparison to what happened subsequently that he was impeached for, it seems much less significant. But look, it is relevant because he wanted this investigation into Biden's and their connection to the judge, the demand that Vice President Joe Biden had made to have this judge taken care of, this mattered for Burisma, who was unfavorable to Burisma. So you can't. So his fingerprints are all over this. He was proud of it. He bragged about it. So honestly, this starts to make Trump still shouldn't have asked for it in a, like, it was clear, I want this because he's my political opponent. But, you know, if he'd asked it if he'd known what we know now about the connections between Hunter Biden and Burisma and the policy position Biden was in, maybe there's a world in which that is not an illegitimate ask.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's a sticky situation when you have so many seemingly compromised candidates. The public is going to have to make a really tough decision.
It's a sticky situation when you have the policymaker's son being paid millions of dollars for a very relevant policy.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we'll have more Rising right after this. Please do stick around.